Welcome to Hard Script.
Support the channel by liking, commenting, and subscribing. I promise even more interesting stories. She looked at me across the table, fork still in hand, and said it as if she were commenting on the weather. I just don't feel that desire anymore. 7 words. That's all it took to rewrite our entire marriage. No warning, no build-up, no fight. Just a quiet declaration of indifference, spoken between 2 bites of reheated pasta. I stared at her, not shocked, not outraged, just suspended, as if time slowed long enough for the weight of her sentence to settle on my chest. She didn't flinch, didn't look up. She just kept chewing, like she hadn't just taken a sledgehammer to the last place I thought was still sacred between us. The intimacy hadn't been frequent for months, but I held on, justified it, told myself life gets busy, stress builds, cycles shift. Maybe we just needed a break, a weekend, a reconnection. But that wasn't it. She had disconnected, not out of pain, not out of anger, out of comfort. She'd grown comfortable in a marriage where I stayed, and she stopped showing up. That night, I didn't argue. I didn't press. I didn't ask why. Because deep down, I knew she'd already made up her mind. This wasn't a conversation, it was a verdict. And my silence? That was my first quiet rebellion. I went to bed early, not to sleep, to stare at the ceiling and let the numbness spread. I didn't touch her, didn't reach. She turned her back like always. No words passed between us, but I was wide awake, not panicking, planning. Something cracked open inside me that night. A quiet fracture, clean, sharp, undeniable. And in that crack, I saw it, the first outline of my exit. Not dramatic, not messy, just absolute. Because a man doesn't leave when he's angry. He leaves when he sees no reflection in the eyes across the pillow. The next morning, I got up early. She was still asleep, peaceful even, as if she hadn't said something that detonated everything I still believed in. I made coffee, took a shower, dressed in silence. Then I walked out the front door. No words, no note, just absence. And that's when I heard it. A voice behind me, not hers, her friend's. She stood at the bottom of the steps, keys in hand, eyes wide. Hey, wait. But I didn't stop walking. Because in that moment, I understood something no man ever wants to admit. Sometimes, you're more alone in bed with your wife than you'll ever be walking away from her. I didn't stop walking. Not when her friend called my name. Not when she asked if everything was okay. Not when she stepped in front of me with that half-confused, half-concerned look women get when they sense something's broken, but don't know who broke it. Did something happen between you two? Her voice was soft. I didn't answer. I just looked past her. That's when she said it. She's not herself lately. Not herself. As if I'd been living with some version of my wife that wasn't real. As if the coldness, the distance, the indifference were all part of some temporary weather pattern. She had no idea. This was her. The real her. The one who chose emotional comfort over connection. Who chose routine over intimacy. Who could sit across from her husband and drop a sentence like a blade without blinking. I didn't tell her friend any of that. Because silence is cleaner than explanation. Instead, I said one thing. She said she doesn't feel desire anymore. That was it. 5 seconds passed. Her eyes widened slightly. She shifted her weight, opened her mouth, closed it again. Then she nodded, slowly, like someone finally reading the fine print on a contract they shouldn't have signed. I'm sorry, she whispered. But I wasn't. Not anymore. I walked past her and kept going. No destination, just distance. I spent the next few hours in the city. No calls. No messages. No updates. I watch people live. Watch couples argue and laugh and hold hands. And I realized I had become invisible in my own marriage. And maybe that's why her friend looked at me the way she did. Because sometimes the people around you notice the fracture before you admit it exists. When I came home that night, the house was quiet. No questions. No anger. No, where were you? She was in bed, scrolling through her phone. She glanced up, said nothing. Just went back to her screen. That's when it hit me. She didn't think I'd leave. Because she didn't think I had anywhere to go. But she was wrong. I had myself. And I was finally learning that was enough. She didn't ask where I'd been. Not that night. Not the next morning. She brewed her coffee. Sat at the kitchen counter. Scrolled through her phone like I was just a passing shadow in the corner of her life. And maybe I was. But the difference now? I'd started choosing that shadow. On purpose. She had no idea how close I was to gone. How each breath I took in that house felt borrowed. How I started to view everything, every mug, every couch, every shared drawer, as something temporary. I didn't argue, didn't demand, didn't try. Because once a man stops begging to be seen, he doesn't shout. He vanishes. I started sleeping with my back to her. Not out of spite, out of instinct. My body knew what my mind was still putting into words. This wasn't love anymore. It was coexistence under a roof that used to hold warmth. She noticed the shift. I saw it in how she looked at me during breakfast. The way her eyes lingered, just for a second, like she was trying to read a language she'd forgotten. But she didn't ask. She never asked. And that told me everything. Because when a woman lets you disappear quietly, it means she's already replaced your presence with convenience. I started making moves in silence. I created a private checking account. Shifted half my direct deposit. She didn't notice. Because she'd stopped looking. I began storing essentials in the trunk of my car. Sneakers, work bag, a few shirts, shaving kit. Not enough to raise suspicion. Just enough to walk away when the moment came. One afternoon, I came home early. She wasn't there. But her friend was. The same one who had stopped me that day. She stood in our kitchen, frozen, like she wasn't supposed to be caught. She stammered. Said she was just dropping off something. I nodded. Didn't question. But her eyes said more than her words. She looked at me differently now. Not with sympathy. With understanding. As if she knew what her friend was losing and what I was reclaiming. When my wife got home later, she kissed my cheek. A rare gesture. Maybe she was trying. Or maybe she was sensing it. The storm that doesn't roar. Only gathers. Because I wasn't angry anymore. I was preparing. And preparation is the quietest form of goodbye. That kiss on the cheek? It wasn't affection. It was delay. A subtle pause in the unraveling she finally started to feel. But what she didn't understand was that the unraveling had already happened. I wasn't tangled in her anymore. I was past the grief, beyond the begging, past the questioning. Now I was executing. I stayed out late that week, not because I had plans, just to get used to the feeling of not coming home. I took long drives through quiet neighborhoods, parked at the edge of parks, and watched people walk dogs, chase kids, hold hands. Not because I missed those things, because I was reminding myself what peace looked like. And it didn't look like her anymore. She started checking in more. Where are you? Everything okay? Want me to wait for dinner? I answered when it suited me. Polite, brief, uninvested. She was trying to hold on to something that was already slipping through her hands. And I let her. Because watching her try now, after months of absence, only confirmed how transactional her care had become. She didn't want me. She wanted the version of me that tolerated everything. But that man had packed his bags. One night, I came home and found her crying. Softly, on the couch, knees pulled up, face buried in her hands. She didn't hear me come in. I stood in the hallway and watched. And felt nothing. No pull. No guilt. No urge to comfort. Because I knew what those tears were. Not regret. Not love. Panic. She felt the air shift. Felt the silence stretch too long. She realized I wasn't reacting the way I used to. No fights. No confrontations. No, let's fix this. Just stillness. And for people who rely on your reactions to feel powerful, nothing terrifies them more than your silence. I went upstairs without a word. She followed me 15 minutes later. Said she missed me. Said she wanted us to talk. I nodded, but said nothing. Because when a woman tells you she misses you only after you disappear, it's not love. It's loss management. And I wasn't interested in being managed anymore. That night, I didn't sleep beside her. I slept on the couch. By choice. Because every mile of emotional distance needs physical confirmation. And I was done pretending we still shared a bed. The next afternoon, her friend came by again. Same calm tone. Same forced smile. But the eyes? Different. This time, she didn't pretend to be casual. She walked in, glanced around like she was checking for cracks in the walls. Like she was looking for confirmation that the structure was already collapsing. She stayed for coffee. They talked in the living room. I stayed in the kitchen, out of sight but not out of earshot. I heard her ask, "Is everything okay between you two?" There was a pause. Then my wife said, "He's been distant." As if distance happened on its own. As if it wasn't the natural result of being ignored for months, of being reduced to a background character in my own marriage. Her friend didn't push. But she didn't agree either. That told me everything. Later, I walked her friend to the door. She turned, just before stepping out, and said softly, "Don't let yourself disappear completely." I didn't respond. Because I already had. She just hadn't seen it yet. That night, I didn't eat dinner with my wife. Said I already ate. She barely nodded. We didn't watch anything together. Didn't sit near each other. She stayed upstairs. I stayed in the garage, organizing tools I hadn't touched in a year. Not because I needed to fix anything, but because I needed a reason not to be near her. I checked my private account, steady. I looked at rentals, plenty. I planned the next steps, not emotionally. Strategically, everything she thought was routine had already shifted. The rhythm of our life no longer included her in my future. She started suggesting things, weekend plans, home projects, new furniture. I nodded, smiled even. Because when a man's done, he doesn't argue anymore. He lets her decorate the ruins. The last night we spent in the same bed, she reached for me. I stayed still. She whispered, "I miss us." And for the first time in years, I felt no guilt. Because when she said us, she meant the version of me that tolerated silence, endured rejection, stayed loyal to emptiness. And I had already buried that man. What stood in his place now? Wasn't angry, wasn't vengeful, just gone. And she was talking to a shadow. The next morning, I started moving with purpose. Not loud, not obvious, just precise. I took a day off work she didn't know about. Went to the bank, adjusted legal documents, talked to a realtor, rented a small unit under a different name. No furniture, just space. Not for living, for leaving. Every step was clean, digital, quiet. Back home, she was humming in the kitchen. She thought we were fine again, because I hadn't confronted her. That was her metric for peace. No explosions meant love. But I didn't believe in fire anymore. I believed in ice. That weekend, she suggested we go somewhere. A weekend trip. A getaway. I nodded. Told her I'd look into it. She smiled, relieved. And that smile told me she still believed I was salvageable. That her half-effort gestures were enough to fix months of neglect. They weren't. Because I wasn't searching for a getaway. I was preparing a final destination. I went to the new place after she fell asleep. Brought over a few more bags. Personal items. Old photos. Anything that still felt like mine. Not ours, mine. I left no trace. Returned before sunrise. Climbed into bed beside her and stared at the ceiling until the light changed. She never noticed I was gone. That was the confirmation I needed. A woman who doesn't feel your absence overnight. Won't feel your absence forever. Her friend texted me the next day. Said she hoped everything was okay. That told me something else. She knew. Not everything. But enough. I didn't respond. Because if she knew, my wife would soon know too. And I wanted her to feel that knowledge the same way I felt her disconnection. In silence. That evening, I deleted every shared album. Removed our anniversary from my calendar. Erased saved gift ideas. Not out of spite. Out of precision. You don't leave a battlefield with photos of the war. You walk out clean. That night, she asked if I wanted to go out for dinner. I said I was tired. But the truth? I was done pretending we still had something worth dressing up for. She started paying attention again. Cooking dinner without me asking. Leaving notes by the coffee machine. Asking about my day like it suddenly mattered. But I didn't take it as love. I took it as fear. Fear of losing comfort. Fear of watching a man you took for granted vanish without a fight. She thought she could stitch it all back together with routines. With surface-level sweetness. But the truth is, once a man goes quiet, it means he's no longer negotiating. He's executing. I didn't argue when she brought up therapy. Didn't say yes. Didn't say no. Just let her words hang in the air, unacknowledged. Because I wasn't interested in repairing something she never protected in the first place. And now, she wanted to fix it? No. She wanted to reset me. Back to the version who stayed. But that version died the moment she said she had no desire. The moment she looked at me not as a partner, but as furniture, present, reliable, ignorable. One morning, I woke up and didn't recognize the man in the mirror. Not in a bad way. In a new way. Like the weight had lifted. Because I'd already started building a new life. One where I didn't have to explain my pain or beg for connection. One where I didn't live in limbo, waiting for someone else to feel something. I started telling people at work I'd be moving. Made arrangements for mail. Updated records. She was still planning a trip for us, like nothing was happening. Talking about beach rentals and driving routes. I let her. Because people who decorate their own denial don't deserve rescue. Her friend came by again. She looked at me, paused, and said nothing. But I could see the shift. She knew. She had probably warned her. But some people only understand finality when it's standing in front of them with its bags packed. That night, she tried to initiate something physical for the first time in months. Touched my hand, leaned in closer. I looked at her, not with anger, not with desire, just distance. She asked, "Do you still want me?" I answered with silence. And that silence was louder than any scream. That night, I watched her sleep. Not with affection, with closure. There was a time I would have killed to be close to her again. Would have fought through silence, begged through cold shoulders, broken myself down just to hear her say, "I want you." But that version of me, he was ash. And what was left now was a man who had found clarity in detachment. I moved out 2 days later. She didn't know. Not yet. I took the last bag while she was at a yoga class she'd started attending again. Another reset gesture. Another late signal to prove she was trying. But yoga can't rebuild what years of indifference destroyed. I didn't leave a note. Didn't text. Didn't call. I just left. Left the keys on the counter. Disconnected from our shared apps. Blocked her from everything that gave her access to my space. I didn't know her explanations. She already had all the answers. They were in the nights I waited for her to turn toward me, and she didn't. They were in the quiet dinners where I was just a utensil holder across the table. They were in her words, those cold, sharp lines about not feeling desire, about how things had just changed. She gave me her truth. Now I returned mine. The new apartment wasn't perfect. It was small, quiet, unfurnished. But it was honest. It didn't lie to me with pictures on the wall pretending to be happy. It didn't smell like her perfume or carry echoes of rejection. It was mine. And in that space, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not the fragile kind that depends on someone else's mood, but the real kind. The kind that comes from walking away before you rot. She called. Of course she did. She texted too. Voicemails. Long ones. Crying. Confused. Angry. I didn't answer. Because she wasn't calling me. She was calling the version of me that tolerated pain quietly, that clung to her with blind loyalty, that waited at the edge of the emotional cliff, hoping she'd reach back. But that man was gone, and I had no intention of resurrecting him. The voicemails kept coming. Long, emotional, disoriented. She asked what happened, said she felt blindsided, said she didn't realize it had gotten that bad. But she did. She just didn't think I'd ever act on it. She mistook my silence for surrender. That's the thing about people who rely on emotional dominance. They only feel secure when they believe you'll never leave. And when you finally do, they call it betrayal. But they never look at their own neglect as the first knife. She reached out to my brother. My mom tried to frame it as a communication breakdown. Said we both needed space. That she was shocked I would just walk away. But the people closest to me, they knew better. They'd seen the slow drain behind my eyes every time she brushed me off. Heard the quiet frustration when I'd try to defend a woman who treated me like a background extra. My brother said something that stuck with me. She's not shocked you left. She's shocked you stopped playing dead. There it was. I wasn't the bad guy. I was just finally breathing. She showed up once. At my job. Waited outside the building. I walked past her without flinching. She stepped in front of me, said my name, eyes red. I looked right through her. Not out of cruelty. Out of resolve. Because I wasn't there to soothe her guilt. I wasn't her emotional janitor anymore. She wasn't crying for me. She was crying for the control she lost. I didn't say a word. Walked to my car. Drove off. Later that night, I received one last message. A long paragraph. Apologies. Regrets. Promises. She said she finally understood. But that's the tragedy, isn't it? People always understand right after it stops mattering. I archived the message. Didn't reply. Because closure isn't something you request from the person who broke you. It's something you give yourself the moment you stop explaining your worth. And I had already done that. In the weeks that followed, I didn't check her socials. Didn't ask mutual friends how she was. Didn't wonder if she'd changed. Because I wasn't curious about her anymore. When you've starved long enough, you stop craving the thing that kept you empty. I filled my days differently now. Gym in the mornings. Quiet coffee in new cafes. Long walks without directions. My phone stopped buzzing. My mind stopped spinning. I felt clean, not just physically, but emotionally. Free men don't pace. They build. And that's what I was doing, rebuilding, not from heartbreak, but from erasure. She hadn't broken me. She'd just taught me who never to be again. My place started to reflect that. Minimalist. Clean surfaces. No signs of the past. No reminders of her laughter, her perfume, her voice in the hallway. I didn't need traces. I needed truth. And the truth was simple. I gave her everything, and she treated it like background noise. So I turned off the volume. One evening, I bumped into her friend, the one who always knew more than she said. We crossed paths in a bookstore. She paused, looked at me, and smiled, soft, knowing. "You look different," she said. "I am." She didn't press, just nodded, because she knew what my ex never understood. When a man rebuilds himself in silence, there's no going back. I never saw my ex again after that. Never needed to. Because once you reclaim your power, you stop needing people to witness it. You just live it. Sometimes I'd pass by the old neighborhood on long drives. Not on purpose, just part of the route. I never slowed down. Because I wasn't nostalgic. I was done. People always think closure comes with a final conversation. A last tear. One final scream. But that's not how real endings work. Sometimes closure is a locked door and a new address. Sometimes it's a man who never raised his voice, but left without a trace. That's who I became. Not bitter. Not broken. Just unreachable. And when she finally realized that the silence wasn't temporary, that's when it hit her. She wanted a reaction. I gave her absence. She wanted a scene. I gave her peace. She wanted a second chance. I gave her the rest of her life without me. Real men don't explode. They exit. Subscribe for more power stories.